Being a pool boy, his dad running the filling station. Money was tight, and he grew up understanding the economy of scale.
He has a really good understanding of people and of how complex we are as human beings.
There's a seemingly simplicity to the style.
Okay. Let's just fire one off to see where we are.
His personality as a filmmaker is not forced on you.
The things that he is directing, he cares a great deal about.
I think he just trusts his gut, and it probably started early on in Rawhide in Hollywood, and he started with nothing, and he earned his way into a great situation.
In the late 50s, when I started on Rawhide, you have a lot of different directors every week coming and doing a show. You start finding out what you like and what you don't like about various characteristics that directors have. Finally, one day I started thinking, I had to try this myself.
And he began to realize, I could do this. I would think, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but the reality is I have the heart for it.
The first time I worked for Clint, the history that I knew of Clint was Rawhide. Because as a little girl, my sisters and I would watch Rawhide, and we would get to be the different characters. And my sister got to be Rawhide, the other one got to be the girl, I had to be the cook. But we loved him.
The directors that influenced him most were Sergio Leone and Don Siegel. They're such different directors, but when you look at Clint's movies, you can see the impact that both those talented gentlemen had on him.
How was Sergio Leone able to influence? Not exactly sure how he was able to do it, but I think if you look at the mechanics of those movies, they didn't rely on a lot of dialogue.
But he was great. He had a very vivid imagination. When we did the first one, he didn't shoot many close-ups. Being from television, I said, well, I'm playing kind of a crazy character. You gotta... And so instead of doing the close-ups like this, he'd do the close-ups like he'd do everything in very broad strokes. The way he approached things was so unusual. He always had a childlike glee about things. One time we were shooting in Spain, and he wanted a tree with a hangman's noose hanging from it as sort of a threat to anybody who's riding by. And there were no trees in southern Spain, and Almeria was just desolate. But there was this one yard that had an old, big, dead tree. He goes to the house, and he just all of a sudden goes in their yard and has the crew out there sawing down this tree. And of course the guy comes out who owned the house, and he was incensed. And so Sergio told him he was from the highway department and that the tree was a safety hazard because it was going to fall on the road, and we had to take it out. And here he is in Italian, speaking an Italian accent to this Spaniard, and he convinces him that he's from the highway department. I came back into the States and started doing some American films, and in 1970 I found this script, Play Misty for Me. I actually found it in 1969, and I was just fascinated by it.
I know that when he did Play Misty for Me, that he had gone to Lou Wasserman at Universal and made a deal so that he could direct his first movie.
And he said, yeah, that's fine. And I was completely surprised. And my agent, Lenny Hersham, was there with me, and he came to me and said, yeah, there's just one additional thing that they forgot to mention. They don't want to pay you anything. And to me, I said, they shouldn't pay me anything. I'll pay them. I said, I should have to prove myself.
What do you want, Evelyn?
One Coke?
I'll tell you tonight, I'm really whipped.
I think the first time I knew Clint Eastwood beyond his iconic status as an international matinee idol was when I saw Play Misty for Me for the first time, and I think along with the rest of Hollywood, Clint was overnight. We all recognized Clint, to be a fantastic filmmaker and someone who was really a storyteller, not just an actor, whose job it was to tell someone else's stories.
When he started working with Don Siegel, he started really getting into the other side, what's happening on this side of the camera.
He really did kind of watch Don Siegel a lot and learn the kind of basic craft of making movies. He was just a terrific guy. He didn't waver from his confidence. He liked what he liked, and he moved on. If something wasn't working, if you could offer something to improve the scene, he was the first guy to grab it. And then he used to joke. He said, yeah, anybody, the janitor can come up to me and give me an idea. If it's a good one, I'll steal it.
They had a great relationship together, and they worked on, quite a few films together.
And then Siegel was in Play Misty for Me, and I think he was a bartender. I gave Don a part because I thought it would be fun. I said, wouldn't you want to play this bartender? And he said, yeah, I would. But he said, I'd like to do it. But he said, you should just have a really good character actor do it. And I said, no, I was kidding, half kidding, but maybe I was half serious too. I said, you'll be better for it and more understanding of actors for playing it, and I'll have you there in case anything goes wrong. I copied from Don Siegel a technique that he used. I would write down all my notes on the opposite page, and then I got it all planned out, and I said, I think I got this. I turned out the light, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just almost going to sleep, and I woke up, and I said, yeah, wait a second, I've got to speak, I've got to come in, I've got to be ready to go. So I had to turn on the light, sit back up, go through it from a whole other perspective. Then I realized that this ain't going to be an easy job doing both things. But then after a while, you get used to it. So the whole thing will just start converging and it'll start moving to it.
I really don't understand how people direct and act at the same time. And then to produce, direct, and act all at the same time is a pretty daunting task.
If you're an actor and you actually start to direct, it must give you a great appreciation for how hard the director's job is. My feeling is, if you're an actor, you have to be an idiot not to know how hard a director's job is. You see that.
It was interesting having your co-star also be your director. It's nerve-wracking just because he's Clint. He's an anomaly. He's a legend. It's hard at first because you're looking at Clint Eastwood. And then you just get into your groove, and I started seeing him as his character, and yet then he was also directing me. You don't even know you're being directed. Boss, that little house we talked about, I bought it.
Wow, smart girl.
From my mama.
Okay.
His ability to see and watch while he's acting with me is nothing short of astonishing.
I never felt him directing me while we were acting in a scene together, except once. A scene in the kitchen, talking about his exploits in Africa. For an actor, there's no more disconcerting feeling than knowing that the person you're in the scene with has absented himself. He was watching the movie. He was watching me, but he wasn't in the scene with me. I said something because I really had never felt that before. And he said, "You're right. You're right. It'll never happen again." Never did.
When he's directing a movie that he's in, he really understands the pitches that he hits really well. And he sets himself up to succeed.
Girly, tough ain't enough.
When people think of him, they think of, the guy that's like, go ahead, make my day, like coming out with guns and Dirty Harry. And yet Clint has one of the biggest hearts of anyone I know.
We were friends. And I just one day was with Clint and I said, I've got this NBC series I'm doing called Amazing Stories, and Scorsese's going to direct one, and I gave him a list of the directors I was trying to get, feature directors, to make these half-an-hour television and anthological stories, and I offered him something that I had written myself called Vanessa in the Garden, and he liked it, and he mounted it, and he directed it, and he cast my mother in it as a glorified extra. It's one of the greatest things he ever did for my family, getting my mother on television for the first time. Only Clint Eastwood can do that.
I don't think Clint takes himself so seriously. I think he takes the business seriously, but not himself seriously.
Sometimes it was hard to get a take on the first because everybody's laughing. And that's very important. That infuses a film with spirit. Even if it's a sad scene, everybody's having fun, then the audience is all the closer.
I don't like contention. I don't like bells ringing, people yelling. I like everything to be smooth. I think it should be. If it isn't fun, we shouldn't even be there.
I'll never forget we were doing a scene with a guy. I guess the guy was a little nervous, he was a little unsure of himself. Clint took me aside, he said, sometimes it helps if you could screw up a little bit, because it might make the guy feel like, if Gavin's screwing up, then anybody can screw up and I can do better. And I was like, well, that's a really interesting idea. So the next take, I went in and I flubbed my line. And sure enough, the guy got better. He got stronger. And then I went in and did another take and flubbed my lines. And I said, okay, that's enough screwing up.
I'll never forget it. It occurred to me that there was a time when a bunch of studio heads came up to the film, and Clint had his helicopter up there in Canada. He had his pilot fly them down to the set. It was no big deal. They weren't pressuring or anything. When they called lunch, Clint looked at me and says, "Want to go for a ride?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we go out, and Clint was qualified in the helicopter. We both get on them in the helicopter, and through the front plexiglass window, you could see the 4 or 5 studio types standing there on the hill. What in the world? These two guys going up in this helicopter. I loved it.
Okay, get ready and go.
The only time I ever saw him rouse himself was when I heard there was a slight noise outside the kitchen where we were shooting Bridges of Madison County. Someone moving a truck, just trying to anticipate his every need down the lane, and he heard and he just yelled.
I'd be terrified to see his temper.
Technical difficulty. Holding up things. Something they couldn't get right. It was holding him up. And his anger is sudden. It's like an explosion. Fix it. That's the only time I've ever seen him get anywhere beyond placid.
I've seen his disappointment in people, and when that happens, I've seen the icy side of him. And where I've seen him do that to somebody, and I just never wanted to be in that vision myself.
When he yells, It so shocked everyone. We all had to go lie down. It was really...
He doesn't question the choices he makes.
He just had that sly confidence that this is going to happen.
I think it comes from the roles that he did over the years before he decided to direct.
You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Now, to tell you the truth, I forgot myself in all this excitement.
Clint came along with the right product and the right story and the right character, and I think the audience just really, like a magnet, attached itself to it.
It's a fantastic character he created, and it's iconic, and it's part of American lore, cinematic lore.
He was crossing over a line. He caught a wave at the time. The kind of idea of lawman as judge and jury.
You have this extraordinary persona that is also, in these films, going from the Leone pictures to Dirty Harry, also has a range. He's got a range, you see. And you'd want to see a Clint Eastwood picture. Didn't matter who directed, didn't matter, you go see that persona. You want to be in that presence.
I remember Don Siegel was sick, and it was the day they were shooting the scene where there's a jumper. Clint ended up directing that sequence.
The guy goes up on one of those telescopic cranes to get the guy off, and he talks him down in a rather unorthodox way.
I just like your name and address, that's all.
Why?
Well, like I said, it's such a mess down there afterwards, and it makes identification impossible. Even if they find your driver's license, all that blood and everything. I think I'm gonna puke. Oh, now don't do that, son. I mean, all those people down there looking up, fire chief looking up, his face. You rotten bastard.
He's still the guy that when you're with him, having lunch or whatever, people in equal measure say, there's Clint Eastwood as there's Dirty Harry.
Clint was so popular after that movie, he probably could have been elected president.
To break through the molds of Rowdy Yates from Rawhide, and then all the Sergio Leone pictures, and then his own, triumph as a Western actor and director with Outlaw Josie Wales, which is one of the most brilliant Westerns ever made, in my opinion.
With Josie Wales, Clint had completely escaped the shadow of Leone in some ways.
It's a story about a man who lost his family.
To me, it was a sort of ultimate man wronged kind of thing. The effects of war on everyone, but this particular individual, and betrayal, to the point where he wants to become a total recluse.
In Josie Wales, he tends to attract a group of ne'er-do-wells and misfits. That's kind of a recurring theme in some of Clint's movies.
I was just wondering, I suppose that mangy red-boned hound got no place else to go either. Well, you might as well ride along with us. Hell, everybody else is.
You listen to a lot of Clint's movies. There are things that he's saying in there that are very pithy, deep.
It's quintessential Clint in terms of the character, in terms of the story.
Well, you're gonna pull those pistols and whistle Dixie.
I liked the saga of it, the movement of it, the traveling of it. It was one of my favorite films that I've done.
It kind of breaks the trend of, and he rode off into the sunset. And I'm not sure, if there was some inherent message that the loner ultimately has to join for the world to succeed.
It's for other people to judge the work, and it's other people to judge where I come from on it. It's more fun that way.
Despite the things that everybody knows about him, I think he's a pretty complicated guy.
I like the way he operates, and I want to be like Clint.
Imagine that dude at a poker table, and it's the guy that guy's gonna wind up with all the money in my pocket. I know it somehow, and he's not saying a word.
I think Clint is incapable of boredom. I don't think he's bored about anything. Look what he's got. He's got Dina, he's got his kids, he's got his lifestyle, he's got his art, and he's got his music.
And he loves musicians. And he loves singers. And he and I, for years, we've always sat around and talked about Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan. I mean, that's his thing. He was a piano player for singers. He loves that.
His love for jazz and the way he expressed it in Bird and the way jazz has become a kind of leitmotif of a lot of his work, that is the greatest relaxer I can imagine anybody having in their lives. And music is such a wonderful way of just, I guess, chilling. He'll collaborate with an orchestrator and another composer, but the main themes Clint Eastwood writes himself.
He wrote the theme for Unforgiven. Mystic River, he wrote the whole score. He wrote the whole score for $1 Million Baby. He wrote the whole score for Flags of Our Fathers.
Writing music for the movie is another way for him to say, well, look, this is a personal movie. Not only did I I didn't write the story, but I interpreted the story as a director, and now I'm going to interpret the story musically.
As you read a script, as you start to see it realized, the better directors find the music in it. They don't know the specific piece that they're going to use, but I think they get a pretty good idea of the mood or the tone.
If you are a musician, certainly, and even if you have a great appreciation for music, it's sort of there as you walk, as you talk, as you think in your moments of silence. There's some kind of interlude or some kind of score for your life that's kind of like, floating there in your subconscious, and I think that is certainly the case with him.
So it should go real fast. Boom, boom, boom. You read this all the time, that he's gotten better as a director as he's gotten older.
As his filmmaking has evolved and matured, his characters have matured and become more complicated. Mystic River comes to mind immediately. Unforgiven comes to mind in the same sort of, mental breath as Mystic River.
Hey there, Mark, 548, take one. Mark?
It was an interesting project. I was looking for somebody to rewrite a script. A girl I knew on the lot here was a reader for Warner Brothers. She said, well, if you want a really good writer, you ought to read this story by David Peoples.
The option was running out, and I guess it was the day it ran out or somewhere in there that we got this call from Clint Eastwood.
I said, well, I'll take that.
But this was 1985, and he bought the film outright.
But I didn't want to do a Western at that time. I had done quite a few, and I felt I'd like to maybe sit on it for a while. Maybe it would be better to play this character when I was a little bit older.
All of a sudden I see he's making this Western called Pale Rider, and I was very disappointed that he was making something different.
I put it in a drawer and went through the whole 80s without even thinking about it.
I think I talked to him once or something about a rewrite on the telephone, and he said he was going to get to it.
1991, I took it out of the drawer and said, and I reread it and fell in love with it all over again, and said, this is time to do this.
He did want a couple of scenes rewritten, and I wasn't crazy about the ideas, but I was a little intimidated about the idea of, I could get pretty feisty, but I wasn't going to be feisty with Clint Eastwood.
I started rewriting things, and I found out the more I screwed with it, the worse it was getting. I said, I'm doing what Siegel used to call killing it with improvements, and this is just really good. I don't know why I'm fiddling around with this.
When he showed me this cut of the movie, I said, rewrites aren't there, and he said, nah, it was better the first time. And that I tremendously appreciated, because one of the things in this business is things just get worse and worse as you keep rewriting them, and nobody can ever stop, right? And he has that wonderful restraint.
I think Unforgiven is one of my favorites.
Unforgiven, that's the first Clint Eastwood movie I'd ever seen.
Unforgiven is a really classic movie. And I think that it's interesting, but I think great Westerns depend on their literacy, not on their gunfight.
A compassionate heart and a sensibility that was not what you would imagine as knee-jerk masculinity. An eye for an eye. Make my day.
He saw a different way of doing films and wanted to do more serious films because he'd done all the other films. As you get older, he says, there comes a time in a man's life when you can't just beat up every person, age-wise, where it's believable to the public.
Yeah, so let's see what you do there, Richard.
As you mature in life in other areas, you mature in your work. You should be learning and getting better. If you start getting worse, then you should maybe join AARP. Unforgiven was a changing film for Clint's career, for a lot of our careers that worked for him, because the film got 7 nominations, got 4 Academy Awards, and really, the critics and the world looked at him doing films differently.
That's not pretty hairy. Wait, okay, it's okay, it's all right, good. People grow. They continue to evolve.
Well, the other films were more genre films, and we just went out in the days, in 42 days, and shot them. And he did take more time with us, because I think he felt this might be the Western that might be his career.
I got the job because he asked me to do it. He owns me from that moment on. I got to Alberta, and we met, we shook hands. It was like I was meeting an old friend. And when we started working together, it was like putting on an old pair of shoes.
I didn't like the idea of having to play a tough cop again, and kind of a badass kind of a guy.
You been talking about the Queen again? On Independence Day?
Clint talked to him about it and said his idea was what he was going to do with that script was to be more character-driven, and Gene Hackman agreed to do it.
I believed in him enough, finally, that I thought maybe he would find and help me find something to make the role interesting.
And for Gene Hackman, it was a great move because he ended up getting an Academy Award for it.
You'd be
William Money out of Missouri. Killed women and children.
That's right. I've killed women and children. Killed just about everything that walks or crawls at one time or another. And I'm here to kill you, little Bill. For what you did to Ned. He's not afraid there to take on a really horrible character and say, yes, that's me. That's who I am. You're the man who killed those women and children. That's right. Now I'm going to have to take you down.
To take the Western in a different direction, making the hero a bad person.
But he knows he doesn't want to do it because his wife used to really get upset about that. And he really feels bad about it, but he's got to do it. Miss Ryder, kill us, bitch. Coming out of the tradition of the American Western, which reflected America in the first half of the century, he seems to be tackling what is ultimately the truth about it in Unforgiven. There's a ruthlessness. Yeah. There's a ruthlessness involved. The individuality in order to survive.
I came on the set one day, and he said, I got a problem.
Yeah, if you hit this thing.
For whatever reason, the scene that was scheduled, we couldn't do it. The actor didn't show up or something. I can't remember quite what it was. So he says, can you go to scene 35, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't know, I haven't looked at it. So it was a couple of pages of dialogue. And I said, well, I'll try it, And he was so good about that because he had to do that scene that day. And he was so thoughtful and so understanding of what an actor goes through when you're searching for lines and you do something unexpected like that. I really loved him for that.
I know that when we finished Unforgiven, we walked back to our office and he sat down on the couch across from me and he says, I hope we have an audience for this film.
Because I was so emotionally involved in it and everything, I thought it was fantastic. But somehow I didn't think anybody else was going to get it. And I was stunned at what he'd done. It was exactly what I'd written, and I was overwhelmed. But again, I thought, Lord Clint Eastwood, he made this movie. And only the writer's going to be the one who likes it.
I think Unforgiven will stand for a long time as the last great Western.
It was a long time before he made the movie, but it was worth the wait.
It was just kind of one of those things where its destiny was to be in the 90s.
As a filmmaker, he's like High Plains Drifter. He's just drifting. He just goes from experience to experience. He's not intellectual about, I gotta make a story in this genre, in this style. He waits for something to wash over him. He waits for a book, a script, an idea.
I guess that's the special thing. That's the good thing. That's the thing that should be lauded. In a town that wants conformity, in a town that wants the same product repackaged, that Clint has chosen the path he's chosen.
You see that close up here?
I think that his films, to me, purely as a viewer, not as an actor that's having worked with him, but just as a movie consumer, have a unexpected level of depth and complexity that somehow he is able to tap into again and again and again.
Basically, you have to trust your own feelings, your own instincts, and your own taste in judging material, because that's all you have to go by. If you try to start pre-thinking what other people are thinking, you're going to get yourself in a real confused state.
He's been a mayor, for Pete's sakes. He was an actor. He did the spaghetti westerns. He did the Rawhide. He does TV. His family just did a reality show. He directs all kinds of different films. He doesn't seem to say no. He seems to say, why not?
I bought the book, which was a very popular book at the time. It was on the bestseller list for years, I think. And we were looking for a director to tell the story, and my first choice was Clint.
So, just go ahead.
There was no real precedent to make it an easy choice for me to just basically say, oh, Clint made a movie like this, so perhaps he'd like to make this one. Since there are so many connections and similarities, I don't think this was similar to anything he'd ever done before, and that was the same. And for that reason, I went to him. And I was also hoping he'd agree to play Kincaid, the main character. Well, it was Clint's idea to cast Merrill. When we sat around our first couple of meetings to decide who we were going to get, Clint only had one choice. He said, I think I'd like to see what Merrill thinks of this.
I didn't know anything about it except the books. Romeo and Juliet was taken from an earlier source. That play, nobody remembers. But it's what Shakespeare did with the same plot, same story, but it's just how you tell the story.
I was just picking you some flowers.
Oh?
Men still do that, don't they? I'm not out of date, am I? I'm picking flowers for a woman, a sign of appreciation.
No, not at all. Except those are poisonous. I think he saw an opportunity for himself to reveal something that was another dimension to his fans that already bought a certain character from him. I think he has very highly evolved both sides of his character. He has I don't know if anybody else would agree with me, but he has a female sensibility in many ways.
I don't want to need you.
What?
Because I can't have you.
I really didn't realize how vulnerable he let himself be in that role. And that's not something you just unpack from your kit bag. That has to reside somewhere in you. And yet he has this image of sort of Uberman.
Gotcha.
I think he's a harsh judge of himself. He sure was. And a little bit of it was bullshit, you know. A little bit of it was just trying to make everybody feel at ease after each take of his own. He'd say, well, that was adequate. You know. There was a scene in the kitchen with a big fight scene. He was at the counter and he turned away from me. And I could see he was really upset. The scene never made it into the film. And I said, why would you turn away the envelope, you know, that would come your way if you put this out? It's a beautifully played scene. And he assessed it as not right. The director assessed it as not right for the film, where the actor might have wanted all the accolades.
And roll it! Roll it! Hey!
For a man, especially a man who walks in our business with the persona that he owns, to rip open his chest that way. But he felt for the film it was best that it not be there. That's a really sear kind of intelligence and a willingness to be cold about your own work.
Well, ego, it kills all of us, certainly, in terms of creativity, because you have to let things go. Sometimes in letting something go, you find something really lovely and brilliant and creative. And it may not be something really big, but something will replace it.
And he doesn't want to miss that fresh moment of anguish, humor, mistake, that turns out to be fantastic, the stumble that you might do that says everything about your character. He loves that stuff.
Once in a while, you get a surge. You get a little surge of 2 or 3 scripts that in a row. You think you would like to do all of them. In the early 2000s, as fast as I would finish one picture, somebody'd give me another script that I liked. So sometimes I'd be preparing one I liked that I was editing one I also liked. And I kind of went through that. When I was doing Mystic River, we were working in the editorial room. At the same token, I'm reading $1 Million Baby, and I like that. So I'm thinking, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that next. So I'm preparing one as I'm starting another, and I went through a little period like that.
The first reason to want to do Mystic River for me was Clint. I love the idea of directors who have a kind of continuity with their actors.
You know, one thing that was really, really different was that he expected all of the performers to have done our homework and to come to work ready to go. You're not going to have rehearsal, and you're not going to maybe go through the same sort of process that you've now come to expect. You know, I'm going to have endless conversations with the director or the writer about my character. And, you know, with Clint, I had one conversation. He once came up to me and Lawrence and said, it's good, you guys, a little faster. And I was like, wow, I think that's the first piece of direction I got. And that could have been the last, a little faster.
If you look at Mystic River, it's even more impressive because most everything you see in that is first take.
Well, let's call it creativity, because I think that's what it is. That's his form of creativity, that he understands that many times on a first take you'll get something fresh that you wouldn't get on take 8 or 9 or whatever.
There's real respect for imagination and the hard work, but there's no, let's just go again 12 more times just to see what happens.
For certain kinds of actors, that's the best kind of a vote of confidence.
And so all of us, me and Sean and Kevin and Lawrence and Marcia Gay and Laura, we were scared. We didn't want to be out there with that one take that sucked, you know? So we all practiced.
When he wants one more take, it's going to cause tremendous panic in the room. If there's 5 actors in the room and he wants one more take, they're all probably looking at each other. What did I do? Was it me? Was it you? Why does he want one more take? He always walks away after 2. If Clint wants one more take, that third take, everybody's going to be the best they've ever been in their careers to please him.
My daughter in there! He said my daughter in there! Mystic River is a very sad film, a dark world in which vengeance has to be taken. It's like the tragedy of the everyday. people's lives, the ones who are on the periphery, the ones we don't hear about.
Get in. Get inside.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood in New York City, and that kind of situation that Dave Boyle went through was omnipresent, pretty much. I had friends that had been molested as kids, and you see the decay that happens from the start. It's ultimately a most horrific crime because it's a crime that visits itself upon the victim over a course of his entire life.
In the case of Mystic River, that's a transgression that's incomprehensible.
He lets you find what you want to do. You think you're doing it on your own, but it's within a very clear structure that he already has.
One of the basic things that's great about him is that there's a lot of stuff that we've gotten used to kind of doing over the years that are the ways that we think movies have to be made. And he has sort of cut away a bunch of the crap.
One of the secrets of his being a really good director is married to this seeming no pressure, casual, easygoing, is a deep prep. He has imagined the scene. He has scored it. He has lit it in his mind. And all he doesn't know is what's going to happen in it.
Efficiency is really something we should all aim for. Unfortunately, we all have in our minds that unless you suffer some kind of consequence, it's not art, you know, and I think Clint has proven that wrong.
One thing I'll never forget is we were shooting a scene, and Tom Stern is a great cameraman, has worked with Clint for a long time, and there was very little lighting in the scene. There was a practical lamp sitting on a table, and then I think there was maybe one other light, and we walked in. Clint took a look at the scene we were about to play, and he just went over and said, and just turned off one of Tom's lamps. Just one of his, not that practical lamp, like the big lamp, and said, okay, roll. And I saw Tom, he's like, you know. And it killed me because I thought, you know, for his eye, he knows what he needs in terms of light in this scene. I mostly thought to myself, to be a cameraman and work with him, you gotta say, okay, that's what he wants. At the end of the movie, I got this kind of moment where Sean Penn's character looks at me and he's kind of across the street and there's a parade. I said, what is this? What's going on here? What is this about? And he wouldn't tell me, you know. He wouldn't tell me. So, which is fine, because then I go, okay, well, if you're not going to tell me, then I'll just have to make something up. When I asked him, he said that's going to be up to the audience to decide. So when people have asked me that, I've sort of respected that wish, you know, and said, you know, I guess I'll keep that to myself. It's not too often that you are able to take something like that and you know, just kind of hold it, you know, so I'm taking that with my grave.
When we got to the end of Mystic River, it was supposed to be a 9-week shoot. It only took 7 weeks, and I was really disappointed that the movie was done. I was really wanted to, why can't we do those extra 2 weeks? Because it was so great and such a great experience and such a, you know, kind of reinvention for me about the way you could make a film.
The movie with Angelina Jolie, that was the first time I worked with him. First, I was scared to call him. Actually, Ron Howard and I were called him together. And we were both on separate lines. I've never called Clint Eastwood in my life. And I thought, I've got to know him a little bit. There's some kind of tiny bond that we have. So we called him, got him on the phone, and pitched him the movie. And he said, well, let me take a look at it. And then a few weeks went by, and he called me, and I was actually at Steven Spielberg's house. And he called me through my office, and I got him on the cell. And he said, I think I'm interested. And I just got off the phone, and I said, oh my God, Ron, Steven, this is amazing. Clint Eastwood's going to direct, I think he's going to direct a movie of mine. And I was just really thrilled. And we went out in the Ron and I went out in the street and high-fived each other.
Every day you learn something from Clint. You know, just the way a set is run, the way a director can talk to people, the way you can get performances out of people, the way you can not get bogged down in details that are not going to make the movie any better.
You watch him work and it seems sort of simplistic.
It's a sort of a seductive diffidence. He sits back and doesn't seem that invested in judging. It's freedom that you really want to feel. That's something that the actors feel, and the crew does not feel that. I'm just going to tell you, the crew is in a different kind of vice, because he's so invested in making the thing have momentum and move quickly and organically. When he feels that he has the scene credibly, authentically made by the actors, he'll move on. And it strikes terror into his crew. And so they come, and they're on their very tiptoes to be ready for anything that might happen.
Clint has for years, kept his crew together. And it's a familiarity. It's also he knows what to expect.
He even says, I hire the people I feel are right for the jobs, and he lets them do their job. He gets out of the way, is what he says.
He comes to the set. Usually they start around 9 o'clock. Everyone's prepared.
You got a good night's rest. You do your work. How are we going home by 2 o'clock in the afternoon? How is that possible?
Clint cares about the people with whom he's working. It is a family.
He really respects and admires and loves his crews.
He gets that a crew spends 12 to 13 to 14 to 15, come on, 16, 20, whatever hours, and at the expense of their own families. So on Space Cowboys, Friday, Clint would have steak and lobster for the crew from the catering, and after lunch he went home.
Well, I mean, we had to finish by 4 so we could get on the golf course because to get that one shot we can never get.
I was sitting in the trailer one day, and it was lunch, and one of the PAs came up and said lunch, and I thought they were going to say, what would you guys like? And instead, Clint said, let's go.
And there's a long lunch line, and usually an actor or director will go to their trailer, and their food is brought to them or already waiting for them.
You know, we walked over to where the catering trucks were, and he picked up a tray.
And Clint was, behind, 20 people, and he wouldn't even think of cutting in front of anybody.
I just thought, oh, that's why he gets people to work with him time and time again.
He's like, they gotta eat too, we're all eating,
There's no bodyguards, there's no coterie, there's no pomp and circumstance.
It said so much in that one moment about who he is.
Wasting your time. I told you I don't train girls.
Gosh, you might change your mind.
There's dozens of trainers who train girls. You won't have any trouble finding one.
I've hardly need a dozen, boss. You'll be fine. I remember reading it, and from page 1 to the end, I thought it was perfect. Later into the process, I heard that Clint was not only wanting to star in it, but wanting to direct it. And I was asked to take a meeting. We sat and we talked for about an hour. We talked about the movie. We talked about my background. He asked if I was an athlete. We chatted a bit about Mystic River, which had just gotten nominated. I remember actually something he said at that time, which has always stayed with me. I congratulated him, and he said, you always aim for the bullseye, but you don't always hit it. So it's a nice thing when it works out. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, you better start training.
Right? Yeah, she'll come back in and then and move around.
If anyone else had directed $1 Million Baby, I don't think it would have got much notice at all.
Everybody has their own ideas about what a movie should be, and I suppose executives here or elsewhere have ideas about what the studio should be making. There were several pictures in a row there that the studio here had doubts about, and one of them was $1 Million Baby.
It's a boxing movie. It's a girl boxing movie. It's a girl boxing movie about a woman who wants to kill herself in the end. I mean, who would see that film? But make it a Clint Eastwood movie, and people are really curious.
It could have easily been a terrible flop. All movies can easily be a terrible flop. And good movies don't always do well, and bad movies sometimes do great. So there's no rule. There's no rule you can follow. Everybody thinks there's a rule, and everybody thinks that they've got the answer. But nobody has the answer.
Got any family, boss?
Well, I've got a daughter, Katie.
That's family.
We're not exactly close.
I approached it like it was a father-daughter love story. It was the daughter he never had and the father she never had.
Actually, it makes me emotional talking about it because it's exactly how our relationship evolved as director, actor, and then how it built into a friendship.
She was successful, but also it caused the tragedy the picture eventually takes on.
We didn't shoot right in order, but we did do the hospital stuff at the end, which was good because that's when my body was deteriorating and I stopped training.
I'm going to disconnect your air machine, and you're going to go to sleep. And I'll give you a shot, and you'll stay asleep.
And just at that point, we had gotten to this closeness in our relationship that I think helped with all of that, and Clint has a very special place in my heart.
Well, Kushla means my darling, my blood.
You know, in this world, we need people who believe in us. And Clint believed in me, just like Frankie believed in Aggie. And he gave me that gift. And it was an extraordinary feeling to have that support and that confidence behind you. If I had to be done tomorrow and I could never do it again, having the experience with him would make it okay.
He'll read a script and he'll say, yeah, this could be an interesting little picture.
And if you give him something, he'll read it right away.
Which is really not something you can easily say about most gigantic filmmakers. You don't really know if they want to do it. You could wait months and years to find out if they really want to do it. Clint Eastwood tells you pretty early on, you're in or you're out.
Maybe I'm a little more decisive. I think that happens as you get more miles on the trail.
There isn't a gray area with Clint where you're going to talk him into anything.
And the older you get, I think there's something about, get to a certain age and what can they do to you? Not much.
I mean, I wish I had that low-stress approach to finding material.
In the case of Gran Torino, from the point he said I like it to the point it was on movie screens was less than a year, which could be a record for a studio picture.
Get off my lawn.
Listen, old man.
I said get off my lawn now.
I'm not gonna say it again. Go in the freaking house.
I go in that house after I've blown a hole in your head, and I sleep like a baby.
He doesn't want anything to do with anybody, and especially people that are different than he is. He's a guy who is very, very disturbed about the way culture has gone. He's had a loss in the family, and he's estranged from his grown children, and he doesn't like the way the neighborhoods have changed. This character seemed like the same age as I am, and not the same curmudgeonly. I'm not quite as negative as the character.
It's always interesting to me, as people get older, the work they do. There's a different rhythm, the writer, the actors, and him.
I think some movies exceed your expectations, and others disappoint your expectations. If you fail on your own terms, then at least you fail with your head's held high. But if you fail on somebody else's terms, you're going to hate yourself forever. Invictus, I thought more people would know about Nelson Mandela and be interested in Nelson Mandela and how he governed when he took over the country, which is an interesting lesson in today's world. Generations pass and they forget all about him. And at least Americans do, but Americans move on fast to other things.
Now push it forward, Sam. Push it. There you go. If the stories are becoming more complicated, the style doesn't. That's the difference. If he's searching for more in a story, I mean, he still has the ability to hold back, not be intrusive to the image. You know, other directors are intrusive to the image, and it's wonderful. This guy just doesn't want to do that. The style's in the same way. Ultimately, that leads to the film that he made last year, which is J. Edgar.
Slow it down.
Well, on J. Edgar, what I did is I'd already had a relationship with him because I'd produced The Changeling. And I felt that we had a bond and that he trusted me, just man to man. I felt Clint might be interested because it was an era that he knows. It's about power dynamics. It's about a complicated man.
Mr. Chairman, I urge passage of the Lindbergh Law, making kidnapping a federal offense, to immediately deliver all fingerprints in this country to my office so that we may create a central file to help arm our agents so that they have a fighting chance against the submachine guns of some of the most dangerous characters in the history of American criminality.
It's also sort of an American tragedy as well because J. Edgar formed the FBI, and he died a very lonely death.
You know, for me, it's like Pablo Casals playing cello in a room by himself towards the end of his life. That's how it sort of enveloped me. It went into his very essence, his being, in a way. And it was very subversive because of that, because it sucked you in. And before you realize you didn't want to leave the room, but you don't like the guy. But you're not leaving.
I've been with the Department of the Bureau for 7 years, Edgar. Almost as long as you.
No. You were with the old Bureau 7 years, and that Bureau is now gone, sir. And so are you.
I was a little surprised that more people didn't see it.
There's so many pictures that people haven't gotten, and 10 years later they get them.
Biographical films, we've seen a lot of them over the years, and some of them work and some don't.
There's no doubt. I think this one has a depth to it and a power and a staying power that once people calm down a little bit and try to see what the hell it was, they'll come around to it.
A lot of times you find material that's interesting, and the public doesn't find it interesting at all. But that's horse racing. You're still doing it from what interests you. And if you're out of sync with the public, that happens to everybody at some point. But you just, the old song, pick yourself up and go back in the race.
Any criticism to Clint, came under in the early part of his career. You mentioned Pauline Kael and others. He's had the last laugh.
So we're talking, and he says, yeah, he goes, to tell you the truth, I still don't think I've done